If you are into podcasting, you know that video podcast software can be really, really helpful, right? So, into this conversation, I want to share with you our top 5 video podcast software to consider right now. So, here's an overview I want you to pay attention to. So, when we talk about video podcast software, you really have to ask yourself, which one do you really need? Well, the video podcast software you need depends on a lot of things. It depends on what podcast you are creating, as well as the setup you are using. For example, if you're just creating a video podcast of a static image with audio running, it will be a lot different from creating a fully filmed podcast show. So if you are looking to create the real thing, you want software for video recording, remotely or in person, podcast video editing, video hosting, publishing, and distribution. So this is kind of important. Now, the thing is that into this conversation, I want to talk about recording, editing, and publishing software in terms of how you can actually adapt it to your specific podcast. Okay. Now let's talk about podcast software for on-premise recording. So go ahead and press the record button on your camera. So if you are recording on-premise, you can record directly on your equipment devices, only to upload your recordings to your computer afterwards. So this is pretty straightforward. Okay, and so we actually suggest connecting your equipment to a computer so you can record straight into your video podcast software. This saves you time and effort as your files automatically save on your computer on a computer while you actually record, right? So if you are recording with in-person guests, let's say you have folks around you in a room or whatever, you would do the same with their equipment, but you may need a mixer or audio interface for everything to connect smoothly. One thing we have found in our research is that most editing video software includes built-in recording, but we really suggest using a dedicated recording platform. And this often have automated features for leveling or controlling your audio and customizing your recording. That's what you need anyway. You need to have a certain quality in terms of audio and video. Okay, so you have a podcast software for on-premise recordings. You have podcast software for remote recordings, depending upon the setup you have. Okay, so the bottom line here is that what really makes a good remote video podcast software tool? Well, you want to have a tool that allows you to easily podcast like a pro without burning a hole in your pocket. This includes preventing bad sounding and looking recording due to latency and call dropouts due to a crappy internet connection. Because if you are going to remote the interview folks, this will happen. This might happen. And you want software that saves time because we understand that your time, the co-host time, and your guest time are valuable. And also, you want a software that allows you to focus on what matters, such as delivering quality content and engaging with your guests and co-host. You gotta have that. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. You are going to enjoy today's conversation. So here's a review I want you to pay attention to. So I want to share with you the best software for video podcasting remotely. And so number one, we have Riverside. This is really great. When you have a Riverside, you have we have a 4K video resolution. This is really good, unaffected by your internet connection. So Riverside is actually a top option for recording remotely. And what we love about Riverside is that the platform uses local recording, so you are able to capture everything directly on your guest devices instead of relying on internet connection. This means what? It means that the bottom line is you achieve high quality results each time. But Riverside offers a whole lot more. So you have features such as high resolution with up to 4K video and 48 kilohertz audio. You have local recording with no dropouts due to poor connection. You have synced separate audio and video tracks for each participant to ensure smooth and flexible post-production. And you gotta have that. You can have up to 8 to 12 participants in each session. You have uncompressed audio and video. So WAV and MP4 files are provided for crisp audio and video. You have highly accurate AI transcriptions available in over 100 languages for easy open and closed captions. You have text-based editor where trimming your video is as simple as deleting text in your recording transcript. You have automated editing tools for fine-tuning audio and customizing your visual layouts. And we also love the fact that you have automated editing tools for fine-tuning audio and customizing your visual layout. So this is really cool. So you have a large constellation of features here. That's the first one. Second one, you have Skype. The cool thing about Skype here is that although Skype is initially a video calling platform, you can use it for podcasting. And on the other hand, guests may have greater familiarity with the platform and brand, but Skype actually lacks features such as local recording and high resolution. So if you're interested in Skype, note that the recording is not done locally, so the recording is done via the internet. And recording can sound patchy or dissimilar between participants depending on the internet quality. So this makes the recording sound less like a natural conversation, and the podcast audience may find it difficult to listen to the episode in full. And also, guests have to have an account in order to join a session, proving an unwanted inconvenience. First, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about video podcast software. I'm just sharing with you 5 of the best that we have found. The third one that you might want to check out is obviously Zoom. Everybody knows Zoom. So just like Skype, Zoom can also be used for a podcast recording. It's actually quite a popular option. With Zoom, you can record video directly on the platform. And you also have the option to capture separate audio tracks. If you don't need separate video files for each participant, this may be an option. Just be aware that with Zoom, the recording is not done locally, so the recording is done via the internet. Audio files may be compressed. You will get a less than perfect sounding podcast. Recording can sound patchy or dissimilar between participants depending on the internet quality. So this makes, again, the recording sound less like a natural conversation, and the podcast audience may not really like it. Another player, you have Zencastr. So Zencastr is really cool, just like Riverside. Zencastr is a local video podcast recording software. This means what? It means there are no dropouts due to poor connection, and the platform also offers extra production tools at a fee, a soundboard, and uncompress the files on the paid plans. It's worth noting that you can't live stream on Zencastr, and the platform is no longer solely dedicated to recording, so you also have to pay a lot to access many of the features. You also have another player, Squadcast. So Squadcast actually offers local recording as well, but only at up to 1080p Full HD. You can record with up to 10 participants in each session on the higher tier plans, and you can also download uncompressed WAV audio. While you can't edit directly on Squadcast, you can download separate tracks and use the script integration. Overall, what we have found in our research is that Squadcast is quite an expensive video podcast recording software, with plans starting at $40 to $50, in some cases $60 per month. Okay, and note that many of these offer free recording plans and can act as free video podcast software as well. So this is kind of cool in terms of giving you the flexibility you need to really get your podcast software game to another level. Let me give you a few pro tips here. So when we talk about video podcast software, you got to really think also about video podcast editing, okay? And so you need to edit your podcast. So you'll need to decide how much you want to edit your content. This boils down to various factors such as your podcast style, your available time, and the number of camera angles you have. So for episodes, you have a live stream, let's say live stream to your social media channels. You may also choose to edit the episode further and later publish it on the dedicated podcast platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. To help you out and on how to edit a video podcast, there are basically a few steps that you need to really at least think about. You want to sync your audio and video to avoid mismatched clips and movements. You want to create and customize your visual layouts. This is kind of important. Like, let me give you an example. You can have your speakers on split screen side by side, or you can have one speaker displayed at a time. It really depends upon the configuration that you really like to have. You want to also trim and crop your podcast video to cut out unwanted content, awkward noises, and to create a flowing narrative. And you want to add in sound effects such as background music, an intro, outro, and anything else you like to spice up your podcast. You want to fine-tune your audio with mixing, equalization, and other tools such as noise reduction. This is really important because you might be thinking this is like a very small act, but it really plays big time on the listener's experience. And the listener experience really is important if you want your podcast to scale over time. You want to really turn your key moments into shareable clips you can share on and promote your show with on social media. So the great thing is that there are a wide variety of tools available which can really streamline your editing process. So you have tools such as Podbean, you have a Riverside, you have Skype, you have Zoom, you have Zencaster to really help you bring your game to another level. And you can also avail yourself of artificial intelligence features, AI features, to help you speed up editing and improve your workflow. Okay, so you can edit recordings by editing a transcript, and you can create clips or remove long silences with just the tap of a button. So this is kind of cool in terms of giving you the capability you need to bring once again your podcast to another level. Also, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about video podcast software. I'm sharing with you the top 5 that you might want to consider this year. I want to talk to you about the best video podcast editing software. And so for clean and great sound audio, it's important to really understand that you want to have a dedicated digital audio workstation, a DAW, also simply known as an audio recording, mixing, editing software to actually edit your high quality audio file. And you can edit your video and piece it together with your edited audio file via editing, via video editing software when you are done. Okay, it's one of those things where you have to see what really works for you and what works for your audience. And some video editors may have audio editing tools as well, or they might integrate with a DAW, which is something worth looking out for. And so, for example, if you are using, let's say, Premiere Pro, you can easily use its Audition integration to actually edit your videos or audio on a dedicated audio editor. So when we talk about video editing software, I want to share with you a few that you might want to consider. And so when we talk about audio first, you have Audacity. So here you have free podcast editing software. You have GarageBand, free for Mac users. You have Adobe Audition. This will cost you about $20 to $25 a month, and Reaper is like $60 to $75 a month. And and there is a discounted license. If you want commercial license, you're paying like $225 to $250. That's for audio only. Now, if you want video and edited audio, you have Riverside, which is free with paid plans that start at $15 to $20 a month. You have iMovie, which is free for Mac users. You have DaVinci Resolve. This is free. Additional features are available in the paid version for $299. You have Adobe Premiere Pro, which again will set you back like $20 to $30 every month. And you have a Final Cut Pro X, which will really set you back like $299. So while this list covers some of the most known podcast editing software, you can also find recording and editing software combined in one platform. Okay, so this is totally fine. So you have platforms such as Riverside, you have Podbean, for instance. So you are able to record high quality resolution, and you also can avail yourself of tools for fine-tuning audio, customizing your podcast with logos and backgrounds, as well as turning your video content into short, shareable clips within minutes. Let me share with you the steps we really want to follow in terms of how and where to publish your video podcast. I mean, you've done a great job. You have your little piece, your 30 minutes piece, your 2 hour piece. Where do you publish it? So basically, you can publish via podcast hosting platform or the platforms, or you can publish directly to video platforms, for example, YouTube or Vimeo. So when we talk about publishing to video podcast hosting platforms, you have the likes of Podbean, you have Costos, you have Libsyn, you have Anchor, which really which is a great tool. Now, when I talk about a podcast hosting platform, what does that mean? It means that you can publish your content on a platform that supports video podcasts. If authorized by you, the hosting platform can directly share your podcast with other platforms such as YouTube and Facebook. So that's option number 1. Option number 2, you can publish directly to video platforms such as Vimeo and YouTube. So this is really cool. For instance, you can create a YouTube account for your podcast and publish both your long form podcast and your smaller bite-sized clips there. So this is really good. A YouTube podcast, we just finished another video on the subject, has many benefits. So how do you actually create a video podcast? Well, you have to plan and prepare your podcast. Very important in terms of the editorial angle you want to follow. You want to set up your studio and video equipment. This is kind of important. You want to record your podcast audio and video. You want to edit your video with suitable podcast video editing software. And it's one of those things where you always have to think about your audience in mind. Okay, what do they want to see? What are their expectations? You want to upload your podcast to a suitable hosting platform. And it's one of those things where you want to find a video compatible podcast host and upload your finished recording. And so this is really good. And then you want to publish and distribute your podcast. So, and it's one of those things where you can actually you want your podcast to be available in a podcast directory. You may also want to share your podcast on YouTube and other social media for extra exposure. It's all about exposure at this point. Let me close to this conversation by giving you some extras here. So when we talk about video podcast software in general, it's really important to understand that a lot of folks are sort of confused when we talk about video podcasts because they're thinking that podcast is only audio. Well, things are changing now. So yes, video podcasts are actually growing in popularity. Podcast platforms like Spotify recently jumped on board, and it seems more and more podcasters are switching to video. So this is really what it is. Even YouTube actually, they actually released in 2022. They did a revamp of their platform by introducing now. They have YouTube podcast now. And so in terms of recording a video podcast, you can use a reliable camera and microphone to record a video podcast. So this is really cool. And you do not have to really break the bank. Okay, it's best to go for something that records at least in HD quality. And make sure that if you're using video podcast recording software, it is compatible with the camera and equipment you like to use. Because otherwise, you'll have to really you have to struggle when it comes to integration. And in terms of running a video podcast, you have all kinds of software. You can use Riverside, you can use Skype, Zoom, Zencaster, and Squadcast. Okay, and it's one of those things where you have to make sure if you are able to find tools such as Riverside, for instance, that does both the recording and the editing, then this is really cool. And so as for trying to like if you're looking for hosting a podcast, you can always try Anchor, which distributes the video content easily to Spotify. So the bottom line here is what? Bottom line is you have to make sure that you have the right equipment, but also the right strategy that really fits your target audience. It's not about just having a video podcast software and really do maybe a podcast once a month or once every 3 months. You know, if you are thinking about, you got to be consistent, whether it is on YouTube or Vimeo or other platforms. Consistency will pay off down the road because you are actually accustomed, like you are making your audience accustomed to consuming your podcast. So if you come out like let's say you come out on a schedule that's not really consistent, folks cannot really trust you. Like you come out like this month on the 13th, the next month you come on the 23rd, and so on and so forth. That could be problematic. So you want to have this level of consistency. When you start, if you are a new podcaster, you got to have consistency, at least to solidify that relationship, to cultivate a better relationship with your target audience. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. In today's conversation, I was just talking to you about video podcast software. And let me do a quick recap here. So I gave you the overview, the review, the pro tips, the steps, the extras, and now the recap. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.